My name's John Robert Dempsey. About 4 years ago, I was at work and I developed a tightness of the chest, and I had to leave work at 6:30 in the morning and go to Fairfield Hospital and be checked out by the hospital staff. I was there, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, while they did all the procedures.
That was the day when Mr. Dempsey's life has changed forever.
I mean, they've damaged me for the rest of my life now. I'm going to be using my sprays for the rest of my life. My social life is limited, yet they're just carried on as if it was nothing.
Mr. Dempsey is one of more than 14,000 workers in the UK who develop onset adult asthma due to the conditions at their workplace. According to the Health and Safety Executive, bakers and flour confectioners are among the occupations with the highest rates of new cases reported every year. Mr. Dempsey has worked at Gunther Bakeries for 12 years. If you ever wondered where the buns to your local McDonald's come from, well, here's your answer. Gunther Bakeries in Haywood, near Manchester. He spent the majority of his days monitoring mixing machines, such as the one you just heard, through to making the buns and getting them ready for the oven. So it's a lot of work with and around flour and dust. But how flour, an ingredient that looks anything but harmful, can cause such life-changing health problems? Dr. Paul Cullinan from the National Heart and Lung Institute tells me that flour is indeed not as innocuous as it may seem, especially in large quantities.
Flour is made up of lots of what we call proteins. If these proteins get into your body, in this case into your lungs, the body treats them as foreign proteins and develops what we call an immune and an allergic response to foreign proteins as a kind of protective mechanism. And that gets manifest when the flour is in the lungs in bakers with baker's asthma as wheezing and coughing and other symptoms of asthma. And when the flour gets in the nose, they get a very similar response, and they're troubled by runny noses and blocked noses and sneezing and things.
Dr. Cullinan has spent most of his research looking at occupational asthma and found that if the baker is removed from the area where the allergen is present, he is more likely to recover.
So once you become allergic, you react to very, very small quantities of flour, so it's very difficult to carry on working in a bakery without carrying on having symptoms. And the problem is that the longer you have symptoms, the less likely you are to recover at the end of them. So most bakers would be advised to stop baking, actually.
Leaving the job, however, wasn't an option for Mr. Dempsey.
Because I've got to pay for my house. I've got all sorts to look after. I mean, I live by myself. If I don't get a decent wage coming in, I'll end up losing my house. And then if I go working somewhere else, I've still got the same symptoms. And I've got to tell them as an employer that's going to employ me, yeah, I do have asthma and I might have to have a little bit of time off. I might have time where I need to come away from work. You know, I mean, people are not going to employ you like that.
According to the British Occupational Health Research Foundation, another solution is eliminating or substituting the sensitizing agent. However, we know that it would be quite difficult to make bread without flour.
Step 1, to make the bread, we have to measure flour.
Measure flour, yes, that's the way we make a loaf of bread.
Okay.
The problem is rather making sure that exposure is effectively controlled. There are regulations employers must comply with in order to ensure health and safety among their staff. One of those regulations is called maximum exposure level, which measures the amount of flour dust in the air. In the UK, this standard is set at 10 mg per meter cubed. However, Dr. Cullinan tells me that in other European countries, it's much lower.
It probably should be near a 1, so that's quite a big difference. And the Dutch, for example, are down at 1. Whether that's enforceable or not, I don't know, but 10's far too high.
He tells me that enforcing those regulations has been a problem, as the HSE lacks the funding to carry out regular inspections at bakeries nationwide. So when employees are diagnosed with baker's asthma, it's the workers' unions that helps them pursue legal action against their employer. And in addition to that, the union has also been raising the issue in front of Parliament. I attended a parliamentary group meeting between the Bakers, Food and Allied Workers Union and Labour Party representatives, including Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell and MP Justin Matters. Among the agenda was health and safety requirements in bakeries. An early day motion has been introduced by John McDonnell in 2009, noting the concern that bakers are about 80 times more likely to develop occupational asthma than the average worker. Mr. Matters tells me after the meeting that moving forward can take quite a long time.
It's very often the case that these kind of issues can take years to be resolved because the machinery of government does work slowly at times.
As far as the first step that you think would really make a change, what should it be as far as bakers' asthma?
I think we need to settle on a standard that we think is acceptable. I think we've got to look at international practice to decide on that. And I think it's also about education and informing people of the dangers, actually, because there's a lot of people who don't necessarily know about the risks of occupational asthma.
I also had a chat with Ronnie Draper, General Secretary of the Workers' Union, who told me that bakers' asthma has been affecting people for centuries. And once the problem is established to be work-related, the union can help in two ways.
So the first thing is, yes, we would file a compensation claim with one of our lawyers who are all specialists in the employment field. So we direct the compensation claim through there. Now, whilst it doesn't make the person better, what it does do, it gives them some reparation for the damage that's been done to them by their employment. But the second point is what it does, it gives us then, because we can see how many people have been affected, it very often gives us a programme of how we need to improve within that particular work site. So it could be what they got local exhaust ventilation. So it actually takes the problem away from the worker, using a hoover to get flour off the floor instead of brushing it like used to happen, which then caused everybody problems. So it's about a good, setting in place a good health and safety standards within a factory.
In Mr. Dempsey's case, the problem has already manifested. So at that point was the matter of fighting for compensation.
In my view, I believe they were breaking the law. So in my view it was, they've got to stand up and be accountable for doing that.
And you won a case, so...
Yeah.
To establish a winnable case, it's about the level of the exposure, how long they've been exposed and how much dust is in the air. There isn't a great deal that the employee can prove on paper at the outset of the case, but that's about getting colleagues to confirm the extent of the dust or the lack of the extraction or the lack of any respiratory protection that's provided in the workplace.
John Carlyle is one of the lawyers from Thompson Solicitors who handled Mr. Dempsey's case. He tells me that establishing a valid case can take years, as it took more than 3 years for Mr. Dempsey's case to settle. He also said that although there are regulations set out for employers, the issue they find is that many neglect to comply with them, let alone organize regular health surveillance among their employees.
The problem that we have is that employers don't comply with the regulations. They don't look to change the working practices to reduce the exposure. They don't look to have efficient and well-maintained ventilation systems, and they just leave employees exposed to the dust. But in addition to it, it's about educating the employee of what symptoms to look out for, and therefore to start reporting those if they start experiencing those symptoms.
And Mr. Dempsey told me that the inspections can't always see the problem.
The inspections that they come round, I think they only come round about 3 years, maybe 4 years at a time. They don't come round like every 12 months or anything like that. And we do know, prior to them coming round, that we've got to get things in order. So when they come round, the place is looking like sparkling. And if they turned up just on spec, be a totally different thing.
Has the employer done anything towards educating you, hey, this might happen, or if you notice symptoms of wheezing, cough, or rhinitis?
No, that's a total blank. No. All their interest was you wear your mask, and that's what you have to do.
Once he returned to the bakery to avoid losing his income, they tried to find him a less damaging area to work at, but eventually he was put back to right where the problem started.
I went back to work after that. I spoke to the personnel ladies, and the agreement was that I stayed within that area and I keep the mask on for the full 12 hours, which was horrendous. And every time they walked past me, they had a look at me to see that I had the mask on for the full 12 hours. Because it does, even though I've got this problem here on my chest and my throat, with the mask on, it reduces my breathing ability. So everything was there was like, And you're doing that for 12 hours.
Taking the employer to court was a step not many employees have the courage to take, fearing they'd lose their job. But Mr. Dempsey never regretted and would do it all over again if he had to.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. I just know that they've been accountable, and that's enough for me, that they've been accountable and they've got to put things right.
Did they?
No.
Although Mr. Dempsey has won a £15,000 compensation, because he's still exposed to flour and other allergens, his asthma is very likely to remain, and treatments aren't going to bring long-term relief. He must use a blue-preventing inhaler several times a day to reduce experiencing symptoms, and he tells me that he needs to get a new one every month, which is way too often according to Dr. Andy Whittemore, GP and clinical lead at Asthma UK.
If somebody is very well controlled, so they're getting symptoms less than 3 times per week, then that blue inhaler should last them most of a year. Unfortunately, in the NHS, we're seeing patterns where some people are using several every month. Something we would like to see is that GPs and pharmacists and people who are doing the prescribing are monitoring these a little bit more closely, because using more than one a month, for example, is a good sign that somebody has uncontrolled asthma.
He added that in a recent survey they found that 82% of people have poorly controlled asthma, and what they are thinking about at the moment is how to communicate risks to people better, because at the end of the day, it is something the person has to learn to live with.
I live by myself. If I do my cleaning up, I know after 2 hours of cleaning up, I have to lie down for half an hour, to catch my breath again and relaxing before I can do any more. My social life isn't like what it used to be. I used to enjoy all sorts, whatever. Taking the kids up the park, a lot of that's finished now. The stuff that's going in my system now, I don't like putting it in my system. I don't like taking tablets I don't need to do. I don't like using that spray because it's stuff that's going in my system that's never been there. And even though I know I need to use it, I don't like using it.